My name is Jeff Cross, and this is Straight Talk, and I'm pleased to welcome and introduce Mark Warner, the National Sales Manager of the Bullen Companies. Mark, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Jeff. And I got to tell you, I watch Straight Talk. I'm an avid viewer and love what you're doing, sir.
Great. Now we have a person watching. Glad to have you. Just kidding. Hey, Mark, what's that behind you over there? What's that plaque?
Well,
Way
there's
back
a
there.
plaque there on my conference table that I received from the ISSA when I served on the board of directors as a distributor director.
Yeah.
That was my first really big engagement with ISSA. And several years ago, almost 4 years ago, I actually joined ISSA's staff and was manager of the education for CMI. So I did a lot of training and talking and training.
Like today.
Sure.
Those were the good days, Mark. I do miss hanging out with you at trade shows and stuff, but we'll be back to that soon, I hope. And now, where do we find you?
Well, I work for the Bullen Companies, which is a chemical manufacturing facility in Philadelphia, right outside of Philadelphia.
Oh,
We get into specialty chemical manufacture. So we do a lot of cleaning products, of course. We do a lot of floor finishes and carpet cleaners and odor counteractants and all that kind of stuff. But nobody generally wants to hear a lot about that nowadays. They want to know if I can get them some disinfectants and some sanitizers. And of course, that's part of a big part of what we do. Thanks for asking.
absolutely. Hey, Mark, it seems like everyone today is talking about the coronavirus and the pandemic, COVID-19. Are we forgetting something?
That's a great question to ask. There is an intense preoccupation with COVID, and that's understandable. And we've had 500,000 deaths here in the United States. So I get why that's on the forefront of everybody's minds. But, it's not like we've been disease free up to this point. We've been fighting specific things for years. The common cold, the every year flu, basic flu, whooping cough, pink eye, all these kinds of wound infections, MRSA, all that kind of stuff is what we've been fighting for years. And people have not really thinking about that right now. They're thinking about COVID. But a great statistic that is really super encouraging as part of that whole COVID optimism thing is that we've learned some lessons, and all of these other diseases have kind of dovetailed down into the wherever. If you talk to healthcare community, they're like, wow, we're not seeing a whole lot of all these other things that we saw. Now that's great news, but it's also a word of caution, Jeff. And that is that when COVID goes away, and we will eventually come out the other end of the tunnel with vaccinations and herd immunity and everything else. We can't drop the ball on what we're doing. Part of the reason why all these other things have dropped is because we've been very aggressive in our cleaning and disinfection. And that should teach us a lesson that we can actually improve society moving forward and lessen the impact of all these other infectious diseases as we move forward with the things we learned during this COVID pandemic.
Absolutely. In fact, I know personally, it's been since last March. I've been staying away from people, cleaning everything. I haven't had a sniffle, nothing. So
There you go.
there you go. You stay away from the bugs, the bacteria, the germs, and you're going to stay healthy. So cleaning plays a big role in that. In an email exchange you and I had, there was a term I saw. It was extreme cleanliness. Well, that sounds like a thing we want. Tell us about that.
Well, so this goes into psychology of where people are, like you, me. You talked about not getting a sniffle, but you're staying away from people. And down the road, we're going to want to enter into buildings, into retail stores, grocery stores, box stores. We're going to want to perhaps go to an entertainment event, some venue, because that's what we used to do. That to us is what is considered normal. But you and I are not going to be very comfortable if we walk into a building that is not extraordinarily clean. And the reason for that is that you and I both know, and much of our viewing audience here knows, that you can't spray disinfectant on dirty surfaces and expect to get anything other than muck. You certainly don't get a disinfected surface. So all we have as human beings to judge on whether we're walking into a place that's safe for us to be in or not is what we perceive. What are we looking around and seeing? Are the floors look cared for? Are they clean? Are the carpets clean? Or do they have traffic lanes and spots that have obviously been there for weeks? And you and I both know too much about carpet spots to know that's organic material usually, sitting there for weeks, fermenting and developing its own little effervescent of odor molecules. So what we're doing is we're looking around, making these judgment calls. And if it doesn't meet our new heightened standard of what we now consider a safe place to be in, you and I are out of there, not hanging around. And it goes to restroom care too. We've always talked about that in the cleaning industry. Working with the Certified Custodial Technician program with CMI, one of the big things that people didn't realize is that judgment calls on cleanliness aren't driven primarily by sight. Most people think it's what they see. They see dirty floors, they see dirty carpets, but the sense of smell is actually a more powerful sense for detecting cleanliness. Like you can walk into a clean looking bathroom and get a sniff of odors and you don't think you're in a clean bathroom. You can walk into a bathroom that smells impeccably clean and it might have tabs of paper or water drops and you figure it's a clean bathroom, it's just heavily used. And those things will overpower what we see. So this takes us to something that we call extreme cleanliness. And that is people need to address that the new norm for guys like you and me to go anywhere, we're going to have an expectation of extreme cleanliness. And we've taken that another level and be rolling out down the road a program that gives us the ability to audit cleanliness levels in much the same way that we've done it in the past, only with a heightened focus on infectious disease control as well, making sure that it's disinfected and sanitary. So a long answer to a short question, but thank you for asking.
It's interesting information, and you're right. There's so much that plays into this that we have to consider it all and make it happen. Otherwise, like you said, we're out of there. That's it.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark, tell us about this. What are your thoughts on what we see in the news recently about we could be going from a pandemic to an endemic?
Just means that it's a threat that we're going to live on with forever. Think about things like polio. Think about things like smallpox. These are all endemic threats to human beings, except as children, we're inoculated. So we don't fear polio. We don't fear smallpox and all these things that are endemic. In other words, a threat that lives on with us forever. We have the ability to control it. It doesn't mean we live in fear forever of this threat because we have vaccinations and because we'll be bringing vaccinations to our children and to their children. This threat won't necessarily be an overpowering threat, but it'll always be kind of hovering. That's what endemic means. One of the things that I get asked about is how does that differ from the word pandemic, right? And it's very, very different. A pandemic basically has to do with an epidemic that has gone global, essentially jumped the pond, and it's affecting multiple countries. Kind of like an epidemic with a passport, pandemic. Thought you'd like that, Jeff. I got that up for you, man. But then good. There's, what's an epidemic then? Well, an epidemic is a pretty big outbreak in an area that's pretty widespread geographically. So you can have an epidemic like bird flu, swine flu. We all know what that's all about. That was an epidemic level because it had a pretty large geographic area. It's an outbreak that is actually spread to a fairly large geographic area. So what's an outbreak? An outbreak is a fairly localized impact. So you might have a school district fighting MRSA, and that's an outbreak level within that facility. You might have a manufacturing plant fighting the common flu and absenteeism. That's an outbreak inside that plant. So there's differences, and it has to do with the reach and the scope. And great question to talk about on Straight Talk, man. I could do this with you all day, Jeff. You're awesome, man.
Well, we'll definitely do more of these in the future. It's great having you. The endemic concept in this article I read mentioned like the common colds. Mentioned at least four of them are cousins of the current coronavirus. They're endemic. We have colds all the time, but we live with them. So you're right on with your comments there.
Yeah. Well, I enjoy I'm kind of one of those weird guys like Gavin and Patty and some of the others. We all love talking about infectious diseases. So it's really odd because, when we're all at cocktail parties, if you don't have the right crowd around you, people walk away.
Well, you're talking about Patty Ollinger, our executive director of GBAC, and Dr. Gavin McGregor Skinner, a director of GBAC. One day we'll be at a cocktail party and we'll talk about this again.
You bet.
All right, Mark.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Jeff.